Hi, Arnav. Let's wait for a couple of minutes to see if anyone else joins, and then we can start. One or two other people had already joined, but suddenly left. I don't know what happened. Uh,
I'll text my classmates for that and ask
Sorry.
them. So I'll text my classmates to join. So
Okay.
they have not joined it yet.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I hope you can see my screen. I think we can start already. I think one, two, three, four of you are here. So I think we can start. The rest would join. I mean, midway. Okay, so today's lecture is a very short one, and it's just something which was missing from our analysis of cellular networks until, I mean, whatever we have done until now. And before we go on to more, let's say, state of the art topics like millimeter wave communications, massive MIMO, or modeling urban networks, I think this is an important part which we should cover. Okay. So it will be just let's say an hour or so of the class, and then we'll stop for the day. Um, until now, what we have said is that a parameter which dictates the performance of a user in the network is the SINR coverage probability, right? So the SINR coverage probability is simply the probability that a typical user is getting an SINR greater than a threshold, right? However, the part that was missing in this type of a definition or type of a performance characterization was that of resource sharing. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that suppose there is a base station, right, and around it there are a lot of users. Okay, so if there are a lot of users, until what we have studied in our course until now, that is the what would be the probability that each of these users. Suppose we fix one of these users, let's suppose we fix this user, and we are interested in couple of things. The first one being how powerful is the signal that it is receiving from this base station, and we are comparing it in some sense, taking a ratio of this power with respect to the powers it is receiving from other base stations, right? um, the part that was missing is how many users are actually present in the cell, right? Since our bandwidth or resources are limited, it's not enough to just say that a user has a very good network or very good signal coverage. It also needs to be known how many users are actually using or sharing those resources. Why? Because a base station actually provisions or allocates different channels to the different number of users. So under something called an admission control, so admission control, admission control dictates how many users a base station is going to allow to connect to itself. Okay, so under admission control, the base station has taken in a certain number of users, and the total available resources among, I mean, within this base station, it will distribute among these users. So you can think about resources as time. Resources can be of bandwidth. Okay, um, in general, from 5G onwards, this terminology has become a bit more flexible, and together they are called time frequency resources. So these time frequency resources are shared among the users, but for the purpose of our calculations, we will only focus on the frequency resources, and we will say that there is an limited amount of bandwidth present with each base station. So there is a limited bandwidth, let's call that B, is available with each base station, and it shares B among all the, again, active users. I'll come to this point why I have kept active in within quotes. Okay. So a part of such a characterization we have already done when we were calculating the rate coverage probability. But when we were calculating this rate coverage probability, the rate of a user, let's call it R, was defined as B log to 1 plus SINR. Yeah. However, the part that was missing that I am talking about in this class is the number of users that are actually sharing the bandwidth. So this NT, or let's, for the moment, let's call it only N. So N is the number of users associated to the base station that share B amongst themselves, right? So it can well happen that all of these users, all of these N users, have a very strong SINR. Okay, but that will not be enough for it to sustain the applications that it is running when N is very large. That is the case where we would start to study what a cell load is, which means how many users the base station is currently sustaining, because this number of users will dictate how each of the users individually, how well they are getting this downlink data rate and all. Okay. The context is clear for everyone. Is there any question before we proceed?
No, sir.
Okay. So if the context is clear, now our challenge becomes how to find out N, right? So how to find N, right? So in case of a single tier network, so we start with the most easy example. In case of single tier networks, can you try to, I mean, if we have a model, so let us assume users are homogeneously distributed. So the location of the users, they are homogeneously distributed. They of course form an independent point process, independent from the base station point process. For the moment, we are not considered, or we are not bothered about whether they form a Poisson point process or some other point process. But we are just saying that okay, the location of the users is uniform and homogeneous throughout the network area, right? So in case there is a base station process, let's call it phi b, which is a Poisson point process with intensity, let's say lambda b, right? And let's call the user process has an intensity lambda u. Remember, this may not be a Poisson point process. Nevertheless, if we are considering a base station process, which is a Poisson point process with intensity lambda v, the first question is, what is the average area of the base station? Can someone guess it? So if lambda b is the intensity of the base stations, remember what? Can somebody tell me what would be the unit of lambda b? So suppose we are considering a Poisson point process in R2.
Number of base station in
Yeah,
square
number of station per
area.
square area. Yeah,
Sorry,
number of base station per square area.
right. So it's, I mean, in the SI unit, it's per square meter, right? So this is the number of base stations per square meter, and from this, can you tell me, or can you try to guess on an average what would be the average area of a base station? So if I tell you that lambda b is say one base station per square kilometer, then area of one base station is, okay, let's try to visualize from the one dimensional problem. Okay, if I tell you that a phi 1, which is a Poisson point process defined in R, right? Or let's R, so let's keep it R, right? And I tell you that lambda 1 here is 0.1 per meter, right? It means what? It means every 10 meters there is a base station on an average, right? So can you tell me what would be the average area of a base station?
So less than 10 meters.
It will be 10 meters, right? So
Yeah.
on an average, if
Yeah.
it is 10 meters, on an average, a base station is present every 10 meters, then the average area, or the area on an average, is actually 10 meters. So a way to approximate the average area of a base station is 1 by lambda b. So 1 by lambda b represents the average area covered by a base station. Okay. If this is the average area covered by a base station, let us call it AB, right? Then what is the average number of users this base station is serving? So the question is, what is the average number of users served by a base station?
lambda u by lambda b.
Right. So it will be lambda u times AB, which is equal to lambda u by lambda b. Okay. So this part was very simple. You just, I mean, again, these are not actual values, and we will come to why that is an important quantity. These are not actual values, but these are, let's say, ballpark figures, which means to say that if you have probably a base station every square kilometer, then on an average, a base station has a coverage area of 1 square kilometer. And if there are, let's say, 100 users per square kilometer, on an average, a base station is serving 100 users, right? So to do a typical, let's say, a simulation scenario, what you would be calculating is per user throughput, something called a per user throughput, and this term is the important one which we are characterizing, which is R, right? So let's denote it by RU. Okay, so that's what we had started with, RU. So we would have RU as the total bandwidth divided by lambda u by lambda b times log 2 1 plus SINR, right? So remember that SINR is of course different for different users, right? If it is closer to the base station, SINR is higher. If it is farther, then the SINR is lower. Sometimes this is called throughput, and throughput, this word characterizes or already inherently contains this term or this notion that something is being shared among the users, and effectively what is one user getting. Okay. In contrast, the part which we have discussed before, which is R, which is simply B log 2 1 plus SINR. I mean, of course, these are not hard and fast terms, and in many, many papers and literatures, textbooks, and so on, these are called with different. They're called with different names. But in our course, we will be calling this first one per user throughput, and this guy the physical data rate. Roughly speaking, per user throughput is the downlink data rate a user is getting by assuming equal resource sharing among all the users associated to a base station. And the physical data rate is the maximum data rate that a user located at a particular location can get by assuming it were already allocated all the resources available with the base station. Okay. So these are very straightforward things. What happens in the case of multi-tier networks? So in case of multi-tier networks, let's take a special case, or let's take a specific example of two tiers, specifically because we have already studied a two-tier network. So in two-tier networks, the two tiers were given by phi 1 and phi 2. The area was given by, the intensity was given by lambda 1 and lambda 2. Right? Now, what the question would arise is, what is the, let's say, what is the average average area, or let's say average number of users connected to a base station of, let's say, tier 1. Can someone guess how to calculate this? Any guesses? So remember that, yeah.
It should be, I think, if average number of user is inversely proportional to lambda, it should be lambda 2 by lambda 1 plus lambda 2, right?
So you're saying lambda 2 by lambda 1 plus lambda 2. So this is what?
Yes, I think it should
So
be some.
what is this?
The
This is the
average.
number of users?
Yes.
I mean, of course, the number of users would depend on lambda u somehow.
Yeah, yes. Sorry. But I think the lambda u cancels out overall.
Mm-hmm.
So
Are
leading
you
with
are you sure?
no, and yeah, let me try.
Okay. So I'll give you a hint. You can work it out on your own. And this is not the main part of the discussion that I want to have, but still, this is an interesting problem to solve. It goes to say it would have something to do with lambda one, because lambda one is dictating what are the number of base stations of type lambda 1 present, right? It would also depend on lambda 2, because more and more the type 2 base stations or tier 2 base stations are present in the network, the area of tier 1 base stations shrink, right? And of course it would depend on lambda u as well. Okay. So a way to model it, and I'll give you the final, I mean, suppose if there were no tier 2 base stations, right, the area of a base station of tier type 1, which I call a1, would be 1 by lambda 1, right? So let us consider such an area. So suppose I have tire phi 1 given by this red axis and phi 2 given by these blue circles. So you, if I have, for example, such blue circles and let's say such red axis, right, the black lines denote actually the cell boundaries, right? So they go something like this. Yeah. On the other hand, if I were to consider that only one type of base stations were present, so that would be only the red type, this red dotted line would represent such a cell boundary. Do you agree? So this red dotted line would be the cell boundaries if only phi 1 was present. And these black dotted lines are the actual cell boundaries. Okay. So what we are interested in is that if we had only this type phi 1 type of base stations, we would have this area which is 1 by lambda 1, but out of that some part has been taken away by the type 2 base stations. So let's consider one such area. So let us focus on one such 1 by lambda 1 represented area, which is, let's say, this guy, right? So I don't know how to shade it, but probably we are focusing on this base station. Okay. So out of this fraction of base stations, or out of this fractional area, some area is present, or some area has been taken away by a type 2 base station, which is this guy. Okay. So ergodically, since mostly we are dealing with homogeneous, let's say, Poisson point processes or homogeneous spatial processes, you would, if you are considering each such area individually, the fraction of area that has been taken away by such a such this other part of the base stations is proportional to the probability that you are actually connecting to that base station. Okay. So as some of you, I think it was Sorodip who mentioned it was lambda 1 by lambda 1 plus lambda 2. But remember that the area is not only dependent on these intensities, but also on these transmit powers of these different tiers. Which means if this blue base station is transmitting with a lower power, then probably this base station area would shrink towards it. Right. And if this blue base station is transmitting with a higher power, then the fractional area that it is taking away from this type 1 base station would move towards the type 1 base station, right? So out of, if I am considering such an area which is of let's say any 1 by lambda 1 in throughout this network, out of this area, P1 is the probability that you are actually connecting to type 1 base stations, which already characterizes the proportional division of this entire area 1 by lambda 1 between these two base stations. Do you agree, or do you get this point? So if I tell you that if I am considering any arbitrary area A, right? So inside this network of red X's and blue circles, if I am considering any arbitrary area A, so let's call this guy A. Out of this area A, since we know that if I am considering any user, any randomly located user like this, so let's call this with this black triangle. And since both of these phi1 and phi2 are homogeneous Poisson point processes, we can shift our origin to represent this user, and we have been calling this black triangle as the typical user, and we can do it from the perspective of all the users, which means quote unquote we can take this origin anywhere. This black triangle has P1 probability to connect to the tier 1, and 1 minus P1, which is P2 probability to connect to tier 2, and this all the users are doing. So effectively, the fraction of users that are connecting to tier 1, right, is P1, and the fraction of users that are connecting to tier 2 is P2. That means if we are thinking in terms of the coverage areas, so coverage area means what? Coverage area means the area within which if a user is lying is connecting to that particular base station, whose coverage area we are defining, right? So the fractional area which belongs to a base station of tier 1 out of any randomly selected area of size A is P1 times A. So the effective area which a user or which a base station of tier 1 is serving is P1 times 1 by lambda 1. Okay, and this guy inherently takes in lambda u and lambda 2 inside of it. I mean, of course, it has lambda 1 as well inside of it, but this term represents the total area as if there were no other base stations, and this is the fractional area that remains to the base station of that tier, given that there are other base stations involved in that area as well. Is this justification clear, or line of logic clear? I mean, these are not hard and fast derivations. Okay, this is just let's say getting a rough estimate of the number of users associated to a tier.
Sir, when we calculated P1 in previous examples, considered for a typical user, so that did not depend on lambda u, right? So in this case, how is dependency coming?
Right. So lambda u no. So we are still calculating only the area. You are correct. So area is the A1, which is P1 times 1 by lambda 1, and the number of users which you will be considering that is being served on an average by a single base station of tier 1 is lambda u times A1, right? So this is similar to what we had done here, right? So if AB is the coverage area and lambda u is the density of the users, then lambda u times AB is the average number of users the base station is serving. Now the effective average area of tier 1 is 1 by lambda 1 times P1, which we are calling A1, right? So let me just remove this so that there is no ambiguity. And A1 times lambda u becomes the average number of users that tier is serving. Okay. Is this part clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if this is clear, let me tell you what are the issues with such a modeling. Okay. And why I discussed these rough estimates, because soon, as I mentioned in the previous office hours as well, that soon I will be sharing with you some of the papers which you will be going through, and they are very let's say state of the art papers, which means they have been coming from 2015, 16, 17 onwards. So they are real research papers, not let's say tutorials or subject or let's say course materials. Okay, so in those these type of let's say assumption to model the number of users connected to a base station and accordingly quote unquote the cell load has been used, right? But there are several issues with such a model. The first issues being, so there are the issues with such a model is that in real world networks, not all associated users are active users. So this is a straightforward one, which means currently what we are considering is the average number of users that are present within the area of a base station. So suppose the area of base station is again, as I explained, 1 kilometer square, and if lambda u is 100 per kilometer square, on an average 100 users are associated to that base station. By association, it means that these users are present inside the coverage area of that base station. But in real world networks, not all of these users demand a certain service from this base station simultaneously. Okay. As a result, when the base station, when it allocates bandwidth to all of these users, it doesn't necessarily take into account all the users that are connected to it, but it takes into account the users which are active. Okay. But that's not the bigger problem here. The bigger problem is that of inhomogeneous service. And I'll tell you what this inhomogeneous service is from the perspective of a single cell. So let us consider a single cell. So in case there is a single cell, a cell means single base station. So if there is a base station and there are no other base stations in the network, that means the coverage area of this base station would be circular in shape. You agree with this point? Because it would be isotropic, which means in all directions it has the same extent of coverage. In case there are two base stations present, of course there will be a hard boundary between them like this, right? But in case of a single base station, let us consider this special case, and it has a circular coverage area. Okay, now let us assume that the users which are present inside this base station coverage area are represented by these blue circles. Okay, so the user traffic models are sometimes have associated with themselves two different metrics. One is how they are spatially distributed. So the user traffic model has to consider the spatial distribution and service request arrival. Okay, now what do these two mean? It means that from this perspective of base station, how many users are currently there in the network and what the cell load is would be dictated by one, the spatial distribution, which means how many exact location of the users geographically from the perspective of the base station, which means there would be somewhat near users and some cell edge users, and they would be served differently because their rates would be different. Why their rates would be different? Because their SINR is different. The one who is located farther has a weaker SINR. And also the service request arrival, which means how many requests of service or how many data to download per second is arriving at such users. So sometimes this is called lambda a, or this is denoted by lambda a, and this is what we had been calling lambda u. So lambda u is simply a parameter which represents per square meter how many users are present. and lambda a represents at each user how many requests are coming in per second. So is there anyone who has done the course on communication networks? I don't know if it is called communication networks or computer networks, but it teaches queuing theory. I think Sanjit takes it. Has anyone done this course?
Yeah, in my BTech I did that computer network.
Sorry?
Yeah, sir, in my BTech I did that computer network.
Okay, so you have done this in BTech. So lambda A simply represents, or if I consider another term which would be interesting for us, is the data size. Let's denote this by sigma. So sigma is bits, lambda A is requests per second, and this represents user per square meter. So the traffic density, or W, is represented by sigma lambda A lambda U. This is sometimes called the traffic intensity. It denotes how many requests or how many bits of data, right? How many bits of data is being requested from this base station per unit area per unit time. Is this clear for everyone? So this is bits per second per square meter. Okay. So suppose all of these are homogeneous, which means, I mean, generally, those of you who have already done queuing theory would know that a Poisson arrival process is used to model something called a lambda A. So lambda A, or let's say service request arrival is generally modeled using a Poisson arrival process. And for all of you, if you do not know what a Poisson arrival process is, it should not be difficult for you to understand at this point, because it is the same thing which we have been doing in 2 dimensions. It's the same thing in 1 dimension, where the dimension is the time, which means the number of requests coming in within a certain window of time is Poisson distributed with some parameter lambda a. Okay. And all the other results which we have derived for 2 dimensions or 1 dimension I mean, they hold true and they are valid for a Poisson arrival process. Which means if you want to find out what is the probability that within 1 minute of time there will be no arrival, it is simply the void probability, which is e to the power minus lambda a times 1 minute, and so on and so forth. Okay. So Poisson arrival process is simply a traffic arrival process model where the requests that are coming in is modeled according to a Poisson arrival process. Okay. The point, okay, I digressed a bit, but the point that I will be trying to make about inhomogeneous service is that suppose users are coming into this network homogeneously getting themselves distributed across space, which means the probability that there are certain number of users coming inside this area A1 is the same as the number of users that are coming inside this area A2 statistically, right? And that is the homogeneity in the space. And accordingly, and similarly, the number of arrivals that are coming inside per second in A1 is also the number of arrivals that are coming inside per second in A2 if the size of A1 and A2 are the same. Okay. So now, even though the users are coming into this network in an homogeneous manner, they are getting different rates of services. Why? Because as I mentioned before, suppose there are 10 users. So suppose n equal to 10. And if we consider, for example, user 1 and user 2. So the SINR at user 1, let's say S1, the rate at user 1 is simply b by 10 log 2 1 plus SINR. In this case, there are no other base stations present in the network, and as a result, this will simply be SNR. The rate at the second user is simply b by 10 log 2 1 plus SNR at 2. So this is SNR at 1. Okay. So now couple of very quick questions, or let's say those rapid fire type of questions. Can you tell me R1 is greater or R2 is greater? Anyone?
R2 should be greater.
R2 should be greater. Now
R2
suppose
should
both
be
of,
greater.
right? So suppose both of these, what is the unit of R1 and R2? Anyone?
Bits per second.
Bits per second, that's also correct. So suppose both of these users are demanding the same amount of data, which means suppose user 1 is demanding 10 MB of data, or it is downloading a file which has 10 MB of size, and user 2 is also downloading the same file which is of 10 MB of size, right? So if R2 is greater than R1, right, which user will take it longer to download?
User 1.
User 1 would take it longer to download. Now imagine a case that users are coming into this network homogeneously. When I say homogeneously, it means that whenever suppose 100 users come into this network, they get themselves distributed inside this coverage area of this base station uniformly, and every second new users are coming, right? Now as this spatiotemporal process evolves, right, if I take a snapshot of this of the location of these users, right, um, do you agree when I say that there would be more users towards the cell edge than there will be towards the cell center?
Yes, sir, there is a possibility for that.
Right. So suppose again, imagine this case that 10 users have come into the network, right, and they are trying to download the same amount of data. Now some people will complete their download very quickly and disappear from the network, right, and some people will take or linger a bit longer into the network to download the same amount of file size, and within that time more 10 users have come into the network, right. Again, some of them will be closer to the base station, some of them will be farther to the base station, and the people who are farther to the base station, they have now already have an added burden on the network by increasing the n, but also the users which are closer to the base station, since they are disappearing faster, as this spatio-temporal process evolves, you would see that although users when they come in are homogeneous in nature, when they are accumulating, or when we take a snapshot of this process when this process goes into saturation, which means users are coming in, users are going away with their service completed, and as this process evolves, there would be an accumulation of users near the cell edge. Okay. Is there anyone who has an issue with this line of thought, or why this is true, or someone who did not get what I'm trying to say? Okay. In case it is clear, we would be discussing it further, and we will try to mathematically characterize this. But it already says that you cannot have a model which simply counts the number of users associated to you within a coverage area. Which means if you are taking into account 10 users coming inside this base station coverage area every second, it doesn't mean that these 10 users are having the equal impact on the cell load of this base station. Okay, so I have a small simulation with me, and I'll not do the entire simulation in the class. I'll share it with you later, but I can show you the figure. Okay, so let me see if I can paste it here. Yeah. So I hope this is visible to you. So here on the x-axis, I have the traffic density, which is bits per second per square meter, right? And I have, I mean, of course, I will share the parameters with you. So the base station has a bandwidth of 1 gigahertz, right? And there are users coming into the network and getting themselves distributed uniformly. And I am calculating the throughput of each user using this formula of B by N log 1 plus SNR. Yeah. And this is this guy. And this is what you, most recent works in stochastic geometry has done. But they ignore this part of dynamic traffic, which means not all, first of all, not all the users are requesting the traffic, but also whenever the users come, they do not get served homogeneously. As a result, a users, as they accumulate towards the edge of the network, and if I say that in a snapshot there are 100 users, these 100 users, because of their inhomogeneity of service, are not uniform, no longer uniformly distributed in the network. As a result, the actual throughput per user, right, on an average, is lower than that predicted by homogeneous presence of users. Okay, so again, this is something that I can share with you, this small code, but you can try it out yourselves. What you have to do is simply generate. Okay, before sharing, I would ask you to just try it out yourselves. In case you are facing a problem, I'll share with you. So what you have to do, you would have to have certain lambda a, certain lambda u, and certain sigma. Okay, this will be defined by you. Defined by, let's say, the user, or if I call the user, it will be something else. Defined parameters, right? And you can fix couple of them. For example, you can fix sigma, which means you are characterizing this network from the perspective of only one type of service. Let's say this type of service being, let's say, online video streaming, which probably needs some Mbps of data rate. So you would want to download a certain file that has a certain bits, and you want to request or you want to perform such a request at let's say every 10 seconds, or sorry, every 10 times every second, which means 0.1 is the arrival rate, right? Sorry, 0.1 means one arrival every 10 seconds. So every 10 seconds you are requesting sigma bits, but how many of such users are there? That is lambda u every square meter. Now you can fix lambda a, fix sigma, and vary lambda u such that the traffic density increases. So this is W, which I had characterized here. Then in one instance, you just find out what is the total bandwidth divided by n of all the users log 1 plus SNR. Take an expected value of it, right? N in one case would simply be lambda u times a. That would give you this curve, right? On the other hand, if you do not consider this formula, but rather find out at each, you go to each user, right? And at that instant, find out what its SNR is and how many users are currently present in the network, and do B by N of that value. So that would give you this curve. Okay, and try to see what is the difference between these two curves as you change lambda a and sigma. Okay, I hope the task is clear. Is there any question from your side? Is this part clear? Why the actual, or why when you consider dynamic traffic and inhomogeneous service, the actual throughput that a user is getting is lower than that predicted by assuming that the users are actually present homogeneously in the network? Is this part, I think, should be clear, right?
Sir, yes, this part is clear. I had two doubts.
Please.
Yeah, for the simulation bit, if we are
Mhm.
trying to simulate SNRs, so
Mhm.
should we take a like a lean space SNR value, or try to actually simulate the variation of SNR
So the second one. So you have to actually generate locations of the users and find out individually how far they are from the serving base station. That would give you the signal power, and you assume a noise power as before, and that gives you the SNR.
Okay, sir. One more
And
thing.
yeah.
If we have to force a system to be homogeneous, can't the network provider provide a higher bandwidth to those users who are having poor SNR?
Absolutely, they do that, and that is something which happens in real world networks. But for the moment, we don't want to complicate things. Okay,
Okay.
we start with this system model, and okay, I'll tell you one sneak peek. What happens is that the base station identifies which are cell edge users, right? In real world, it will not be SNR, right? It will be SINR, right? And since SINR makes things even more severe, because the users which are located around the cell edge, so this guy is experiencing a stronger interference signal as compared to a user which is located in the cell center, right? So SINR makes things even more severe. As a result, what happens is that these base stations coordinate between themselves. Of course, you must have studied about fractional frequency reuse, but this is something beyond that, right? So in frequency reuse, neighboring base stations use different frequencies so as to minimize the impact of SINR. Okay. In fractional frequency reuse, the base station allocates special frequencies to these users which are located in the cell edge, such that it minimizes the chance that any other neighboring base station is using the same frequency. Whereas the nearby users, which are the cell center users, they can be operating at a frequency which the neighboring base stations are also using, thereby although countering for a higher value of interference, but since the signal is simply so high that the interference is not a main factor there. Okay. These kind of coordination mechanisms are something which is a bit out of the scope of our course, but this is something which I would like you to explore on yourself as well. Okay. Okay. If this part is clear, let's come back to this simple scenario of a single cell. A couple of things I would be trying to derive is I would be characterizing, or I would be trying to define what a cell load is. For that, let us recall that in case W is our traffic intensity, the traffic intensity generated by the users, so traffic intensity generated by those users whose distances to the base station is between, let's say, R and R plus dr, is given by some dw, which is a function of R, of course, is W times, which W is simply sigma times lambda A times lambda U times 2 pi R dr, right? So this is something which follows from what we discussed in the office hours, which means that if you are considering at or at a simple ring of width dr, it would matter where this simple ring of width dr is taken, which means that the amount of traffic generated by a ring of area located at, let's say, 1 meter is of course very different than the traffic generated by a ring of width dr located at, let's say, 10 meters, right? Because of course this is much larger. So the fraction or the or the fractional traffic intensity generated by those users which are between R and dr is given by dw of R. Okay, so the cell load, and again, roughly speaking, before going into the technical details, cell load almost always will be defined as what your demand is divided by what your supply is. If I come back to this example of users coming into the network and distributing themselves homogeneously throughout the network coverage area and asking for a certain file of certain size sigma every second, right, given by lambda a, this cell load is defined as whatever they are demanding divided by whatever they are being supplied as data rate from the base station. Which means in the example which we discussed, where users are coming, 10 users come in every second, and suppose such new 10 users are coming in before the previous 10 users have been served, what would happen? Such a homogeneous arrival of users would eventually lead to accumulation or increase in this number of users more and more. And eventually, if the base station keeps on admitting these users inside this cell, the number of users would tend to infinity, right? So this would be the case of what we would call an overload. On the other hand, if the demand of these users are getting served, which means the SINR either is so high or the users are so close to the base station that their demand is getting served quicker than what the actual demand rate is, which means the service rate is faster than either the arrival of these service requests, or they are so closer that just their SINR is so high uh, uh, to download this sigma amount of data, then we would call the cell to be in underload. So roughly speaking, it would always be, cell load would be the ratio. So the load generated, okay, before going to the cell load definition, let's call the load generated by these users. Which are these? These are the ones which are between R and DR, is the ratio of the demand, which is bits per second per square meter in that band of DR, divided by the supply, which means each of them is getting a supply of capacity, which is CR, right? CR is of their peak traffic intensity to their peak rate. So this is the peak traffic intensity to the peak rate. Now we can have a definition of the average cell load. Is simply denoted by rho bar, is an integral over 0 to R of such traffic intensity divided by the peak rate at that R integrated across dr, right? So in case I mean, why such a formulation occurred? It was because the traffic intensity generated at a certain distance R is of course a parameter which is dependent on R, right? And also the, I mean, whenever such a user is getting served, it depends on where that user is located, and that's why the peak rate is also a function which is dependent on R. The fractional load or the load generated by such users is their demand, which is the fractional traffic intensity at that distance, which is dW of R, given by divided by the supply at that R, which is the capacity or the peak rate at that R. The average cell load hence is rho bar, which is given by an integration over 0 to R of dWr by CR. Okay, this is just the definition of I mean, again, this CR is the physical data rate at location R, or at a distance of R from the base station. Okay, is this part clear, or do you want me to repeat it once more? In case these individual elements were not distance dependent, you would not have this function of r in the numerator and the denominator, which would be the case which we were discussing before, which means suppose 10 users are coming in and each of them are getting the same data rate from the base station. All of them would be actually served in the same time, right? So in case everybody is getting 20 Mbps of downlink data rate and 10 users are arriving uh, uh, in the network and each having, let's say, 2 MB of data to download, that means every second there is 20 Mbps of supply and it is getting served 20 Mbps each of them, and everybody gets served, right? However, why such an integral exists? Because it doesn't only matter how many such users are coming in, it matters where they are coming in, and that's why the traffic intensity is a function of the distance, but also they are getting served with a capacity or with a data rate which is also a function of the distance. That's why the average load is defined as this integral over the demand by supply across R. Okay, so there is another aspect to it, which is that of the number of active users in the cell. And this brings us back to, again, those of you who have already done queuing theory, this would be very familiar to you, which means that you can think about the users and their requests coming in are equivalent to requests coming into the queue, and the base station being the server, and they are serving these requests based on independent service times, but they are not identically distributed because each of these requests are being served with a time which is dependent on the request distance from the base station, right? So this is not just a spatial process, it is also not just a temporal process like a queuing system, it's a combined spatio-temporal process, right? So suppose there are X users active in the cell, so we assume that radio resources are shared in a round robin manner among all the users. So we would assume that the radio resource, which is the bandwidth in our case, is fairly shared between all the active users. That means each user is getting a time, let's say TU, given by 1 by X, where X is the number of active users, right? This allocation can be realized by using a round robin scheduler, for instance. X evolves like the number of customers in a processor sharing queue with Poisson arrivals at an intensity. What is the intensity of the total number of arrivals? Intensity of the total number of arrivals is pi lambda r square, where r is the radius of the coverage area. Then the distribution, by the way, this this active users in the cell, this all analysis is not something which is in the syllabus. I am just trying to give you a link between the cell load that we have. So this is the part which is in the syllabus, right? I'm just trying to draw a comparison between your processor sharing queue and the loads in a base station. Okay. So if you are not following this part, it is still not a big problem. But just for the sake of drawing this comparison, let's try to find out the distribution of the random variable t bar, which represents a typical service time. A typical service time is if you pick out one of the users from this network, how much time it is spending inside the network getting served, which means if a request is coming in from a customer to this queue, how much processing time or how much service time it is experiencing from this processor is simply given by, as we had discussed just now, sigma times 2r dr divided by cr r square. I mean, I understand this where it is coming from. So this is simply sigma by cr and the probability that it is actually inside r. So it is 2 pi r dr. This is the probability that it is actually inside that ring divided by pi r square. And hence pi and pi disappear. And it becomes 2 sigma r dr divided by cr r square. Right. We would, to keep it simple, let us assume lambda to represent lambda u times lambda a. Again, these two are somewhat dependent parameters because if you say that certain number of requests are coming in per second per square meter, you can have 10 users arriving with a request of 2 Mbps. You can have 2 users arriving at with a request of 10 Mbps. Eventually, as this process evolves, they would matter in the same way. 2 users are also getting distributed homogeneously in the service area, and they are requesting 10 MB of data, right? And 10 users getting distributed homogeneously in the area and having 2 MB of data requests over a period of time. Such things are the same, right? So as a result, we will say that lambda, which is just to keep things simple, we will calculate the load of a processor sharing queue. And those of you who remember Little's theorem, I think one of you who mentioned who has done this part, right? So from Little's theorem, we can calculate the load of a processor sharing queue, which is simply lambda times pi r square is the average number of users coming inside this area, 0 to r sigma of cr 2r dr by r square. And this is derived only by considering this queuing theoretic analysis. Luckily for us, it matches with what we have done before. Okay, I have been using sigma. It is actually W, or let's keep calling it sigma lambda u lambda a. So this is sigma lambda, right? Sorry, lambda is already outside. Yeah. So again, so these are the bits that are coming inside this area. Okay, now this is fine. So this lambda is actually lambda u lambda a. So lambda times sigma becomes W, and therefore this becomes exactly same as what we have derived, or we have defined our cell load to be, which is rho bar, right? So the load of a processor sharing queue, it corresponds exactly to the cell load. We would be focusing ourselves with only, or we would be focusing only on the case when the cell is in underload, because overload, so sigma rho bar greater than 1 corresponds to the case of overload, and rho bar less than 1 corresponds to the case of underload. Okay. In case you have not understood from, let's say, this part to this part, it is still fine. It is not something we would be assessing you in the exams. It is just to make this connection that if you derive the same thing from a queuing theoretic perspective, it's the same as calculating the cell load. However, these are the two cases that would be of interest to us, but we will focus only on the underload case, because if there is a cell which goes into overload, that cell, either shuts down or it has to employ certain kind of admission control mechanisms, which mean the operator needs to set an upper limit of the number of users that base station can admit in itself. But since admission control is something also not a part of our course, we will not be studying that particular case. Okay. However, for the underload case, if you remember a key property of this processor sharing queue, that the stationary distribution of the number of customers is insensitive to the distribution of the service times. It follows from the reversibility of the underlying Markov process. But in case if you have not done a queuing theory, you just the part that you need to understand is the distribution of this number of active users, which is nx, which means that the probability that there are x number of active users in the cell is given by rho x, rho bar to the x multiplied by 1 minus rho bar, which means that if I give you a single cell, right, and I give you all the transmit parameters of the base station, which means you have been given the bandwidth that it is using, you have been given the power that it is serving with, you know the noise power density, so the power spectral density of the noise. If I also give you the traffic parameters, which is lambda u, lambda a, sigma, hopefully you will be able to evaluate rho bar, which is the average cell load. Suppose in case you find out average cell load is 0.75 or something, the probability that there are 10 number of users at any instance in this cell is given by 0.75 to the 10 1 minus 0.75. Is this expression clear? What does it represent? I mean, I'm not going into the derivation of it. I can refer you to the queuing theory books which derive this. But does it, is it clear what this represents? It simply represents what is the probability that the active number of users in the network is X. And it is given or it is evaluated by this parameter rho bar, where rho bar is simply the average cell load. Is it clear? Yes, no?
Yes, sir.
sir.
We might need a review or in
Yeah.
our own time.
Yeah, I understand. What I would ask you to do is go back and brush up some of this queuing theory basics. Specifically, look at let's say MG1 queues with IID service times, and find out what is the average number of customers in a queue. Sorry, not the average number. What is the active number of users? What is the active queue length? Okay, and it is related to this quantity rho bar, which in our case we are calling it the cell load. In the queuing theory, they call it the load of the processor sharing queue, right? So in case you find out this average cell load, you would be able to have a probability distribution on the number of active users. One very simple thing follows very quickly, which is the expected value of nx, which is the average number of active users, which means, again, if I go back to my example, is if 10 users are coming in with requests of 2 MB of data every second, right? And if I look at this snapshot after a long time, which means I have given enough time of mixing of this spatiotemporal process, in case it is under load, it means that the number of users have not gone to infinity. If I look at the average number of such active users, which means if I take a snapshot of this number of active users present at a time in this network, what number I would find, which is the average given by nx, right? So basically what you have to do is find out this summation of, so how do you find out the average when you have given the PDF? You simply have to do x, multiply it with the PDF, where x can go from 0 to infinite. Okay, so would you want to quickly do it? I mean, it's simple. So I'll just wait for 1 minute in case you want to do it. So remember that this is simply, so if you take out 1 minus rho bar outside, right, it simply becomes rho bar plus, 0 is 0, so rho bar plus 2 rho bar square plus 3 rho bar cube plus this goes until infinite. Do you remember how did you used to do this in class 11 and 12?
Yeah, sir. It's
So you
expansion of standard formula 1 minus x into x. to the power
Right.
minus
You multiply row and then shift all of them by 1 and subtract them. So everything becomes row bar plus row bar square plus row bar cube and so on. Right. So if you call this guy as n bar, so n bar by 1 minus row bar becomes this, and then row bar n bar of 1 minus row bar, and you write it like this. It becomes row bar square plus 2 row bar cube plus this thing. Even I don't remember very clearly. And then you subtract both of
row.
them.
It
Yeah,
should be row
Should
by
be row
1 minus row.
1 minus row whole square.
yeah. So what do you have?
Row
N
Row
bar
bar
by
of
equal.
1 minus row.
Yeah.
whole
Yes.
square in
Yeah.
denominator.
No,
I
it
don't
should
think
be
so.
That will be cancelled.
so
Yeah.
that is
So
the answer without
yeah.
the square.
So I think this should be the final value. In case you are getting whole square in the denominator, I think you are missing this part. When you subtract this 1 from 2, you basically get n bar, right? Because it becomes 1 minus row bar in the numerator
Yes,
and 1
I
minus row bar.
forgot to multiply this 1 minus row bar.
Right, right, exactly. Okay, so this is what we are interested in. This gives us the average number of active users present in the network, right? You can simply find out some quick results that when row bar equal to 0.5, we have n bar equal to 1, which means average number of active users would be 1. It essentially means that as soon as the users are getting are arriving in the networks, the previous users are getting served already. Okay, so this is a special case of that thing. When row bar tends to 1, right, n bar goes berserk. It shoots up and goes to infinite, right? So a well dimensioned network is one which has a limited row bar, which means in case if you find out a row bar which is very close to 1, probably the network operator has to install several other base stations inside the network in order to bring row bar down. Okay, that's one point of observation from the perspective of a network operator. The other point which I would be, I think today is we fell a bit short on time, quite strangely, because I had covered this topic in one class in the previous one. So a couple of things which are still missing. Okay, so this row bar, how did we calculate this row bar? We were able to calculate. I mean, it's sometimes important to go back and look at what we had started with, because this was not our main intention. Our intention is to still find out loads in the network where the cells are of this nature, right? And in order to give you an introduction, I had moved on to the single cell network, and it had helped us in deriving row bar, which is the average cell load, and accordingly the average number of active users we have derived. But we will not be able to derive row bar if we do not know the shape of the cell. Do you agree with this point? The added complexity in case of Poisson networks is that not only the shape of the size, not only the size of the cell is not known, which is this capital R is not known, but also the shape is not known. And as you have seen that this integral takes, I mean, it is a very, distance dependent integral. So in case of an irregular shaped cell, so suppose if I have a cell shape like this, and the base station is located here, I mean the integrals goes until different limits in different directions. And unfortunately the bad news is, until today there is, I mean not until today, but even today there is no closed form expression or no analytical expression that characterizes the shape and size of cells in a Poisson network. I'll tell you what these are called in a Poisson network. So if you have heard about the term tessellations, or Poisson-Voronoi, or in our case it would be called Poisson-Voronoi tessellation. So Poisson-Voronoi tessellation refers to the structure formed by the coverage area of these cells. So in case all of these base stations are transmitting with, let's say, equal power, then the cell boundary would be, of course, midway between the cells, something like this. So the structure thus formed is called a Poisson-Voronoi tessellation. Okay, so these honeycomb-like structures, individually these cells are called individual Poisson-Voronoi tessellation of the underlying Poisson point process. I had discussed this briefly in DCS, but I think none of you were there in DCS, right? We are the graduate students. But if I take a bit of segue from here, I'll continue this discussion in the next class. Don't worry about it. There is still a very interesting part remaining about cell load. But for the moment, I would pause and give you a bit of introduction to these Poisson-Voronoi tessellations. So these structures have applications much beyond cellular networks. I mean, of course, in cellular networks, they represent the cell area of a, or the coverage area of a base station. But if you think about latest research in supercapacitors or batteries, the cathodes have pores in them, and the efficiency of a battery or a supercapacitor is defined by its ability to retain an ion inside that cathode, which means if the pores of a cathode match perfectly with the size of the ions, that means that capacitor or this battery would be able to retain more amount of charge within itself. If the ion is larger, doesn't work. If the ion is smaller, doesn't work, because it will simply pass through. So supercapacitors sometimes have found, scientists have found that the structure of these pores are sometimes well modeled using Poisson-Voronoi tessellations. That's another, let's say, interesting example to motivate you to do some fundamental study in stochastic geometry as well. I mean, the applications go much beyond cellular networks. What we would be discussing in the next class, which I could not finish in today's class, is that how do we solve this problem of finding rho bar in case of Poisson-Voronoi tessellations? Because certainly we would not be able to do the integral over the distance. I'll give you a sneak peek into the next class. So what we were interested in is dw of r, right, divided by c of r dr. C of r was simply b log 2 1 plus SINR or SNR in case of a single cell network. What we would be doing is that instead of, so SINR is of course a function of distance, as I have been mentioning in today's class time and again. But although unfortunately we do not have the domain of integration of R, which means we do not know where until from where to integrate in such a cell, fortunately what we do have is a statistic of the entire SINR, which means we have the PDF and the CDF of SINR. Do you agree with this point? We have it, right? It is the coverage probability. The coverage probability is simply 1 minus the CDF, which means if we differentiate the coverage probability, we would find out the PDF of the SINR, and we can replace the entire SINR with some gamma, right? And here we can multiply the PDF of gamma or the PDF of SINR at that gamma, which will be again derived by 1 minus the coverage probability at that gamma d gamma. Okay, so this is a sneak peek into how we will convert this integral in the spatial domain to a different SINR domain to find out the average cell load in this case. I'll discuss this in detail in the next class, and I will also say why that also will not be enough and why a realistic characterization of the cell load in such Poisson point processes is even today an open problem. So we will discuss this open problem in the next class, and we will close this issue. I mean, this was supposed to be the last module of this sequence of classes, which is single tier, multi-tier association, SINR in multi-tier, and the cell load. And hopefully from the next class onwards, we will go to millimeter wave networks. Any questions? If not, let's meet in the next class. Thank you. So I would hope all of you do a bit of study on your own on queuing theory. What I can do is I can share this code. I mean, of course, I'll share the recording of this lecture, but try to simulate this on your own. And by next week, probably just send me a reminder such that in case you are not able to do it by the next week, I'll share this code with you. And open any classical textbook on queuing theory and go through MG1 queues. Okay, and that would give you all the details which we were discussing in this part of the class. Okay, thank you guys.